It doesn't matter what softwares you know today, because with time, every technical skill gets outdated. What truly stays with you are the core principles, your mindset, and the way you think about your subject. Welcome to the Foundations for UX Design, a 15-episode series that will take you through all the important lessons and realizations I've had so far as a self-taught UX designer. My name is Ansh Mehra and I am a product designer and storyteller at Zuddle.com, which is a virtual events hosting platform. In this session, we will be learning some of the most common mistakes students make when they begin their career as a UX designer. I hope you've seen all videos from the series preceding this episode. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this session. So without wasting any further time, let's get started. Welcome to Lecture 10 of my free course, Foundations for UX Design. Today we will have a crisp and a to-the-point marathon of my top most valuable Figma tips and tricks. Let's begin with the simple ones. Let me bring back the Figma UI because the first shortcut is on navigating through the 6 most important panels on Figma. So on the left you have your layers panel, and sometimes you want to navigate through your assets panel, and then if you click on this book icon right here, you would open the libraries panel. And of course, when you're a developer, you might have to see the prototyping panel or the inspect panel as well. Now clicking through this entire UI can be skipped by just using the option shortcut. So if I click on option 1, option 2 and option 3, I can actually navigate through these panels very easily. Option 8 would open design, option 9 would open prototype, and option 0 would actually open my inspect panel. You would be wondering, how am I actually hiding all the Figma UI? You can do that by actually pressing command /. And if you don't want to hide the right side panel, and if you want to get rid of the left side panel, you can do command shift / that would hide the left side part. So even though you can use your design panel, you would have much more space simply because you've hidden your layers panel. Selection boundaries. This is a very interesting concept because even though you are hovering over different objects, without even clicking or seeing the layers panel, you can see the structure of that specific group. So when I hover over something, you would see a 2-pixel stroke. If I select a specific object which is inside an auto layout, you would actually see a dotted line that shows the parent of the auto layout. And of course, 1 pixel would show you the actual object that you've selected. A lot of people don't know this, but there are a lot of special characters that you can use in your designs to save a lot of time. For example, when you're truncating a specific sentence, a lot of people actually use 3 dots. Whereas in reality, you can use a shortcut of option and semicolon and directly get those 3 dots without any issue. In a lot of cases, you have some UI where you might want to add some supplementary information. For example, Ansh Mehra, who's from Delhi. So rather than putting it around a bracket, you can always put this dot, and you can access this by option 8. If you are working in India and if you're working on an e-commerce app, you might want to have the rupee symbol instead of the dollar symbol. So you can access that by holding option and 4, which is probably the dollar sign on your keyboard. But if you want to have the rupee symbol, that is also accessible if you click the option key. Spatial arrangement versus the layers panel. This is one concept that very few people know. Now, at the outset, I would feel that, 1, 2, 3, this is the order in which my layers would be arranged. But if I open my layers panel, you would realize that they are arranged in a different order. We have 2 followed by 1 followed by 3. Therefore, it's not necessary that if you've arranged your files in a specific way on your Figma canvas, your layers panel is also arranged in a similar way. How does this affect us? Because when you rename your files, when you're prototyping, these things can really confuse you. So to quickly put things in order, you can use the sorter plugin that in a single click would arrange all your files, and then once your files are arranged, you can rename them properly without any issues. X and Y coordinates. Now, Figma represents a layer's position on the canvas using X and Y coordinates, similar to how we did in math. But the tricky part is that these X and Y coordinates begin from the top left corner of the layer's bounds. So if you increase the Y component, your file or your layer would not actually move up, it would actually move down. So if I have my file here and I've made a box. In this case, I have my x coordinates. If I increase this x coordinates, very well in alignment with my assumption, these things would move towards right. But when I increase the y coordinates, it would actually go down. So this is one thing that is slightly different from how we used to do things in our school-based math. CSS and Figma interpret rotation differently. Increasing degrees would rotate your layer anti-clockwise, which is slightly weird, right? Because when we used to work on Photoshop, or even when we think about rotation, we would feel that, oh, if I increase the degrees, things would move clockwise, because that is what we've been used to. So if I take a specific text layer, let's just type A, and if I rotate this by 20 degrees, things would actually go towards the left and not towards the right. Now, the interesting part is that once you pass 180 degrees in either direction, Figma will count down 0 from that direction. Now, of course, sounds very complicated, but so if you take a close look at this graph, you'd realize that once I go from 0 to 90 degrees, everything works well. Even when I go from 90 to 180 degrees, things are pretty much normal. But if I add any more digit post 180, it would go into the negative directions. So if I have rotated my layer to 170 degrees and I wish to rotate it by 15 degrees more, I would probably expect to get something like 170 plus 15, 185 degrees. But instead, I would get minus 175. So let's try this. Let's just assume that I've put my rotation as 180 degrees, right? And once I increase this number, and I have used my nudge amount, which is set to 10 pixels. As soon as I do that, it would go into the opposite direction. It never goes to 360 degrees. It limits itself as 180. But the fun part is that if I am designing this on Figma, and if I rotate this at, say, 180 degrees, followed by another 10-degree nudge, if I go into my inspect panel, you would realize that the rotation is actually the negative of what Figma calculated. So my CSS does not say minus 170 degrees. It actually says 170 degrees, because both Figma and CSS interpret this in opposite ways. So it's just a small detail that, would be helpful when you're doing your handoff, because if your developer exactly follows the Figma rotation values, everything would feel inverted. The Dhohetry threshold. If a response appears after the 400 millisecond threshold, users eventually become disinterested, according to a study done in the late 1970s. So whenever you're making a prototype, you'd realize that the base amount, the generic default value set, is 300 milliseconds. And a lot of people say, why is this 300 milliseconds? It's probably because they're following the Dhohetry threshold. If you make anything more than 400 milliseconds, your animation or your prototype would feel very laggy. Bypassing constraints. Now, you would have seen my first video on constraints and you know how much I like them, but in some cases you want to crop a specific frame or quickly do a quick prototype or cut some things out. So in that case, if I shrink my frame with the normal dragging, I would have all the elements respect the constraints. But if I hold my command key and then drag, it would forget all the constraints. So it would bypass all the constraints. Pretty handy shortcut. Sometimes it just becomes very helpful. Then if you click on a specific layer, you can actually hold the command key and right click and see everything that is there beneath that layer. Now, how would this help you? Simply because there are a lot of cases when, you have locked a specific layer. For example, I might have locked the symbol. For example, I might have locked this text here. And now that I have hidden my UI, I might want to edit this thing, but I can't. But if you hold your command key and right click, you can still select your locked keys and eventually edit stuff. So it's just a very quick way of really going deep into your group hierarchies without navigating through the layers panel. So a lot of people know about Command A. If I do Command A, I would select everything on that canvas. If I do Command A here, inside the frame, it would select everything within that frame. But what if I want to select everything on this frame apart from this bullet text? I would simply do Command Shift A and it would select everything in that frame but from the object that I selected. Sometimes it just becomes very handy and it actually considers the entire page. So in a lot of cases, you might have 50 frames and you want to select everything but a few frames here and there. So what you can do is you can simply select those two things by holding the Shift key, and once you do Command Shift A, you would select everything but that selection. So this is inverse of your selection. Tab, Return, and Shift. This is a very helpful shortcut because sometimes you just want to navigate through a couple of layers. So on your layers panel, if you hit Return, which is your enter key on Windows, you would select everything in that specific group. Now, if I press Tab, I would select the first item in that entire selection. If I press Tab again, I would move down in the list. If I do Shift Tab, I would come up. And if I do Shift Return, I would come one level up in the hierarchy. So it's a very cool way of navigating through, different layers without actually clicking something. It saves a lot of time in the longer run. Selection marquee, you can actually club your selection and deep select by holding the command key. So for example, all of these cards are inside an auto layout, but I quickly want to select just the numbers. I also want to select just this number. So I would simply hold my command and I would deep select that digit here. But what if I want to have multiple selections? So what I'll do is I'll actually hold command and shift and quickly make a marquee of everything that I want to select. So if not marquee, you can simply hold command and shift and quickly deep select your layers. Otherwise, if you hold the command key, you can actually create specific selections that would select your items as if you are going through a very deep select marquee. The concept of marking in Smart Selection. Now, when you have a couple of items arranged in a grid or maybe like in a uniform shape, you can actually mark specific selections within that entire group. For example, I've selected 5 layers here, but I know that these things are not ordered properly. So once I select this layer here, this thing, when I've clicked on this dot, this thing becomes a fill, right? This is not a fill, but this one is. This means that I have marked this in my Smart Selection. So I can simply swap items and quickly rearrange my files without much issues. So when you have your Smart Selection, the only way you can arrange or rearrange your things is by marking specific objects. Bypass the falling into an auto layout error by holding the space key. Now assume that there are 2 objects here which are inside an auto layout, and I probably want to keep this A on top and in the middle. As soon as I drag this A, Figma would automatically insert it into the auto layout, which I don't want. So I can actually hold the space key and bypass this layer falling into the auto layout. It is very handy. These things really help you because sometimes you don't want a specific layer to fall into a frame, to fall into an auto layout, but Figma would automatically do it if you don't hold the space bar. So you can bypass that falling by holding the space key. This one is a very underrated shortcut. In a lot of cases, you might be working with a specific poster or an image or a vector and you just want to flip things, right? Maybe on the x-axis and on the y-axis. So if you select a specific layer and do Shift H, it would mirror it on the x-axis. If you select that layer again and do Shift V, it would actually mirror things on the y-axis. It's a pretty handy shortcut and really helps you when you're working with vectors or images. Quickly collapsing layers. Now, when you are making your designs and prototypes, you would see a couple of groups just crowding your entire layers panel, and it's very annoying to close them one by one. For example, if I open all of these groups one by one and go really deep, at one point I would just get annoyed. So you can close all of the groups by quickly doing Command A by selecting everything and clicking on the small arrow by holding the Command key. If you do that, everything would collapse in a single click. It wouldn't work if you do it one by one. So if I have to collapse them individually, it would take a lot of time. But what you can do is, no matter how many files you have opened, no matter how many groups you've opened, if you hold the Command key and click on the small little arrow, everything would collapse in a second. So it just, saves a lot of time. In a lot of cases, you might want to keep a couple of groups and folders open, but just one really annoying group closed. In that case, you don't have to click on this small little chevron. All you can do is do Option L and it would collapse that group. So you can actually use Tab, open stuff, and quickly do Shift Return and do Option L and collapse that group without even clicking on the layers panel. Making group components or variants. So a lot of people know the shortcut key of Command Option K, which quickly helps you make a component. But the thing is, if I select these 3 files and do Command Option K, it would club them together to make a component. I don't want that. I want all of these 3 files to be individual components. So in case I want to make each of these instances a separate component, I would select them holding the Shift key, click on the small arrow and select Create Multiple Components. Now, we can take this to the next level, because what if I want to combine them as variants? So if you want to have these instances as variants, all you have to do is go here and click on Create Component Set, and it would automatically make them into a variant. A lot of people know about undo, but very few people use redo, because what if I'm making a design change and in one instance I feel like, no, maybe it's not working out, but then I realize, oh wait, maybe that did work out. I can actually go back to that state by doing Command Shift Z, which is redo. So there's undo, but there's also redo. Select all with. This is such an underrated feature and it can save you a lot of time. For example, I haven't made any components. I was doing a quick UI draft and I realized that, oh, maybe this text is too small or maybe the contrast is not good enough. Now, the old way would be to individually select these files and maybe select them across all frames and then change the size. But you can actually use the select all property, which allows you to select specific layers with maybe the same fill, maybe the same font, maybe the same text properties. There's also a very cool plugin called Simi Layer, which actually takes this entire selection thing to the next level, but we will cover all those plugins in the next video. But I'll tell you how this works. I'll do Command \, which opens a quick menu, and I have to select that specific layer, then do Command \, and do select all with same text properties, and it would quickly select everything with the same properties. And now all I have to do is quickly change those colors. So it's a very, very quick and easy way to select items with similar properties. Ungroup or break apart. Now, grouping things, making a frame out of things, all of these shortcuts are pretty common, but sometimes you might use the Command G option to make a group, and after a while realize that, oh, maybe I want to split this group apart. So rather than going on the layers panel, clicking return, pulling them outside the group, what you can do is you can simply select the group and do Command Shift G, and it would simply dissolve that group and bring all the layers outside. Now, this would also work in frames, because if I do Command Option G, I would quickly bring them into a frame. But if I do Command Shift G again, it would dissolve that frame and bring every layer outside that frame, which can save you a lot of time. Zooming in. And this shortcut is only for Mac. I think it's slightly different for Windows. But if you zoom out and if you select a specific frame, if you hit 2, it would zoom to selection. If you hit 1, it would zoom to fit. So you can see all your files in a fraction of a second. And if I hit 2, I can actually zoom to selection. Navigating through frames, I've been using this shortcut throughout this entire series. If you do N, you would shift to the next frame. If you do Shift N, you would go to the previous frame. It's just a very handy shortcut and really helps you when you're doing your pitch decks or maybe showcasing everyone your designs. Outline mode. This is very helpful when you're making vectors or maybe you have a lot of overlapping layers. If you hold the Command key and press Y, everything would enter outline mode and you would see all the subtle things about your layer structure which might not be visible at the outset. In a lot of cases, your colors might mislead you. You might think that there are 3 layers, but in reality, there might be 5-6 hidden layers. So as a developer or maybe as a designer, you can simply switch to outline mode and get to know all the important boundaries and layers that you have in a specific frame. Frame elements. I think I picked this earlier as well, but just to reiterate what I said, if I make a copy, if I select 2 objects and do Command G, I would put them in a group. But if I do Command Option G, I would put them in a frame. So it's a very handy shortcut for, quickly having something that would respect your constraints. Flatten text and shapes. In a lot of cases, you might want to have a couple of text that you simply want to rasterize. This is similar to how we used to convert vectors into raster images on Photoshop. If I take this layer and do Command E, it would actually make it into a vector. So you can actually play around with these individual files. This feature becomes really handy when you're dealing with complex images or maybe graphic designs or posters or vectors, because you might want to quickly make them all into a specific vector file. So if all of these rectangles are split, if I hold Command and press E, it would quickly convert them into a simple vector. Or you can actually flatten complex components as well. So if I do Command E here, it would make them into a very simple rectangle. That was the root, the main skeleton of the entire component. Quickly adding images. Now, if you have a couple of vectors or frames and you want to add images from your desktop, rather than going through the layers panel and selecting the fill option and selecting images, what you can do is simply have Command Shift K and select your images. And once you hover over those solids, it would automatically show you that, oh, I am placing this image on this. I have 2 images left. Second one comes here. Third one comes here. So it's a very quick way to just add your images without much effort. Now, if you want to have stock images, you can use the Unsplash plugin, which is very, very handy. And we'll cover all those plugins in the next video. Image crop mode. Now, if you've added an image fill to your solid, you can actually hold the Option key and double click and enter the crop mode, which will allow you to either crop your image or even scale down and scale up your image. The Eyestroke allows you to pick colors from your canvas and simply convert that into a fill. So if I've selected this rectangle and press I can actually select any color I want. Now, if you select the Eyestroke and hold down the cursor, you can actually see real-time changes in the layer that you've selected. So rather than clicking the colors one by one, you can simply hold the cursor and see your changes in real time. Nudges in hex codes and normal values. Now, if you have a fill that has a solid color, you can actually open the fill panel and open your color editor and actually use the shift key followed by up and down to change your colors in a parabolic way. If I select this hex code and do shift up, you would notice that my picker is following a parabolic path. Once you've selected a color, you can actually change your alpha channel by holding the Option key and dragging on your mouse pad. So it's a very, very quick way to quickly change the alpha channels. And if you let go of the Option key and just use your fingers, you will change the hue. So you can drag over your mouse pad to change different hues. You can hold the Option key and then change the alpha. And if you use the shift key by clicking on the hex code, you can actually have a parabolic shift. Before ending this video, I'd like to give credit to this file that was available on Figma community. It's called Keyboard Shortcut Annotation. That is where I got these keyboard shortcut vectors. Thank you so much for making this file. Advanced sessions are now available on Graphy. So if you are interested in taking your skills to the next level, there are really advanced level sessions on interface design and graphic design on Figma and how to get a design job that pays you well, the art of learning fast and earning more, and then a very in-depth session on how I use Notion to document my goals and aspirations. So these sessions have unlimited replays and are available on my Graphy profile. You can go through the entire catalog by going on anshmehra.graphy.com. I'll put the link in description. So if this video taught you something valuable, make sure that you hit subscribe, make sure you like and post your reviews in the comment section. You can always connect with me on Instagram at anshmehra.work or even put up your reviews on Twitter by tagging me on anshmehra with 3 A's at the end. My goal is to teach you UX design from a very practical perspective by taking you through all the important resources, but your responsibility is to make sure that you follow all the 10-15 videos genuinely and honestly. I will see you in the next video. Till then, take care, keep designing awesome stuff. This is Ansh Mehra signing out. If you like this video, make sure you click on like and hit the subscribe button. I regularly upload videos on UX design, marketing and storytelling.